Hey guys, Tommy Carrigan with Tommy Untamed. We've got a great show coming up. Thank you for watching. Guys, thank you so much for watching today. We got a great show with me. Um it's 6 a.m., 6:06 a.m. I normally don't ever do shows this early, but I went to bed really early last night and got up really early this morning. Went to the gym. It is dark. I was thinking like, man, I was thinking earlier like, I hope I can do the show. Like the sunrise is going to be so brilliant, and it legitimately looks like a Dickensian Oliver Twist, Industrial Revolution, just foggy, gray, dark. It is, the color palette outside is gray. I mean, I can see some red brick, and I can see traffic lights, but it is a wall of gray. So never mind. Um, and I am not feeling too great today. So we're gonna power through this, but I don't have a guest and I need to do a show, and I don't like not working, so I'll unpack that another time or in another life, perhaps with a therapist or Valium, I don't know. Um and I'm speaking way out of turn because I know nothing about computing. I know nothing about AI, and everything I speculate is like college bro 10 bong hits in a dorm room kind of thing. And I try to remain aware of that and honest about that. I just feel, why am I like apologizing for that? This isn't like a Senate deposition. It's my podcast. I can say whatever I want. Yeah, what do I care? Good lord. Um, but more and more, been doing for a while now. Um, Talked about it a little more in depth last summer-ish with Stephen Murray about AI. Um, and recently been talking about it more and more with last week Dan Libby, I think the week before with EM Burlingame, and it's just something. Then last summer, reading that article, "Situational Awareness" by Leopold Aschenbrenner, which I highly recommend. I think that's probably like the most important thing to read right now because he puts a lot of he dampens down, tampers down, dampens down, dampen. He lowers kind of the excitement and speculation for AI, strong AI, AGI. I don't know how this camera is my quote unquote good camera, but it looks awful if the lighting isn't like that of a hydrogen bomb. But the iMac FaceTime camera objectively looks better and brighter, just slightly lower resolution. I can see like every pixel. It looks like background radiation. Well, probably is background radiation. It looks like that perma radiation that's bouncing through the universe indefinitely, never losing momentum. Well, because it probably is. Um, but I always go back to the idea of the atom bomb and the hydrogen bomb. The atom bomb, we obviously weren't the only ones working on it. Um, it's a great book. I think it's called Winter Fortress. I never had him on here, but I did read that book. I think it's by, is it Neil Bascombe, about the OSS attacks on Norsk Hydro, which was the heavy water plant for the Nazis. I didn't know till relatively recently that the Japanese actually had their own atomic program too, and I don't think it was nearly as advanced as the Germans, and I don't believe the Soviets did. But I could be wrong about that. But the idea that like it wasn't necessarily unique to the United States, like everyone knew that this could work. Um, The hydrogen bomb, a couple years later, was the idea that you could make it roughly 1,000 times stronger, which is I always to put in perspective. If you ever look at an old atomic bomb, old footage, you'll notice in the background there's always mountains. It's in like a desert plain with mountains around it, and it gives it some scale. It's like the size of a mountain. Hydrogen bombs, you always notice if you go back and look at any video, or if you haven't noticed it, you'll start to notice it. It's always completely abstract. It's in the middle of the ocean. And not when there's a bomb tests in the ocean, sure. But even then, you can see like ships around it. Go look at any hydrogen bomb video. You will see that it's very nondescript. It's not exactly scale evident. It's just there's like you see the ocean and then like not even clouds, you like see the sky and it's there. Um but Truman, who I would imagine appreciated the atomic bomb more than most, approved uh approved the hydrogen bomb under the well truly due to the logic that the Soviets could do it. And so there was no point not doing it. It didn't matter if we clutched our pearls and said, man, I really don't feel great. It doesn't matter if we clutched our pearls and said, this is bad, this is evil, we shouldn't do this. It didn't matter. The Soviets were going to do it. Um, and that's kind of an interesting. It's not just the capability to do it. Like you could say, I don't know, the early tanks or the early battleships or the early, aerial bombers. That was almost entirely limited by like, can you build it? Do you have the prowess? Do you have the vision? Do you have the materials? Do you have the industrial capacity? The atomic program and then the hydrogen program were all of those things. But it also was, and this is kind of more unique, it was, and do you have the stomach to go forward with it? That's an interesting bottleneck. All of history, the bottleneck is, again, you have the scientists, do you have the materials, can you scale it? It's a very relatively new thing. Like, do you have the balls to stomach this? Like philosophically, that's fascinating. A fascinating bottleneck. Um, so when applying to, and I saw this video the other week, and I just screen recorded it beforehand. I've tried to play videos before, and I think this microphone cancels out the noise. But it's called Microsoft's Insane Quantum Chip by Rillo TV, RILLO TV. I mean, the Majorana1. 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 And by Microsoft, and this journalist or YouTuber was called to come in and see it at an undisclosed location. So that already, the fact that they're already just showing you, and the fact that I saw that, it's already not the bleeding edge. It's not even the cutting edge. This is already what we've been shown. So just as a disclaimer. But on that thing, they're showing that on that chip, if scaled to what they still could fit on the physical chip, which is like, I don't know, smaller than an iPhone. If they scale the existing, not even like a breakthrough, but if they take the tiny little chip that's on the platform, the substrate, the base, and if they made it, to my understanding, the size of the chip, let's just say, I don't know if the microphone will play it. And the result of nearly 20 years of hard work. This team was able to control a subatomic particle that was only and a new architecture for quantum computing that's able to fit 1,000,000 qubits onto this little chip. This thing will have more computation power in it than all the combined computation power in the planet. Okay, but what is it? Okay, yeah. So with a breakthrough in their own architecture on a chip that's smaller than an iPhone, about half the size of an iPhone. And I think what they're saying is because they're saying it would have, not that it does have. I would imagine that it's either not specialized or it's not being properly harnessed, but that it would have more computational power than in the rest of the planet combined. But I mean, so that tells me that, well, number one, that's not the most advanced thing that they have, even just as a corporation, just as a private corp. That is certainly not the most advanced thing that it is and probably has been used by the NSA for, we'll say, 20 years. Depending on how much you like conspiracies like me and you want to believe, it's agreed upon that, right, the military has, their technology is 50 years advanced. Ben Rich, Skunkworks, was that itself misinformation? I don't know. The book itself saying that they have Star Trek level stuff out there. But I don't think it's like that absurd to say, yeah, about 20 years. Let's just assume 20 years from drones to satellites to whatever. Um, but something like the atomic bomb or the hydrogen bomb, that is a weapon that if you didn't know about it, it would be very hard to find evidence of it because it's not something that's being used, right? Even like an advanced aircraft, you might still catch it, or not maybe you and I, but if we were using, I don't know, let's say the F-47, the new fighter jet that's going to replace the F-22, we were probably using it over in Afghanistan and Iraq just as like a proving ground. I'm sure Russia, China, I'm sure they've caught glimpses of it and they know, and we know they have something, but it's, it's that high level game of military poker. The hydrogen bomb, now granted, again, that's harder to hide when you're testing it and it lights up the ocean. But after that initial testing, let's say they didn't test it. Let's say whatever, or they were able to, whatever, somehow shield, just for the sake of this. That would be something that if you were in the know or if you had some base level appreciation or grasp of the science behind that, you could theorize that. And to other people, you'd sound insane, but you could theorize that hey, they have something 1,000 times stronger than the thing they dropped on Hiroshima. Other people in the know would probably be like, yeah, we do. People not in the know would think you're insane. But let's just say they never tested it. That would be very, very hard to prove if you weren't very well educated or in the know. And you could almost never prove it unless it was disclosed. And the only time you'd ever see it in action would be the end of the world. Right? But we know it happened, and just because they were tested up until whatever the non-proliferation treaties were, or the above-ground treaty testing treaties were, and then it went away. But if you didn't have those like old grainy videos on YouTube, you wouldn't know, and I could absolutely see where you think it's horseshit. Like, you're telling me they got this thing. Like, okay, we can find evidence of Hiroshima and their survivors. You're telling me 1,000 times. It sounds like a little kid. It's a bajillion, zillion dynamites. Like, yeah, okay. It would be very hard to prove that. And if you could, you'd probably be killed or slapped with a national security order, or both. With aircraft, there is still a chance it gets seen by another nation. And again, you've seen theirs, and there's you're both not disclosing because it's like a mutually shared disclosure destruction. But what's fascinating about this is like, so what they're saying with that computational chip, that is a hydrogen bomb of computation, right? Because was the atomic bomb more powerful than all the explosives in World War II dropped, or it might have been the hydrogen bomb. Let me Google that. Hydrogen bomb, all explosives, World War II. Yeah, well, I don't think the A bomb was, but the hydrogen bomb. I know for a fact that the hydrogen bomb, the first one, Castle Bravo. No, that wasn't the first one. Ivy Mike, more powerful than all the explosives in World War II used combined. Like, that's a big. And there are levels, right? I mean, there's a grenade, there's your dumb bombs, and there's more efficient explosives, and then there's just the big ones. Like the British had the Grand Slam. I think that was 22,000 pounds. We have the giant shells from battleships, but at a certain point, we didn't make them bigger. We just did 1,000 bombers at a time, and those are like somewhat bigger, stronger. But then you get to the atomic bomb, or let's just say the hydrogen bomb. For the U.S. was 1952. The Soviets' first A bomb was 49. More powerful than all of the explosives in World War II combined. That is such an insane in one thing going off at one time. And now, granted, the first hydrogen bomb, it wasn't a bomb; it was a building. I think they called it the shot cab. You can find old videos. It's a building. It's like a 3-story warehouse out on an island. It is wild. But that in a couple years was shrunk down to bomb size, and then even smaller, and then you put them on missiles and blah blah blah. But all the explosives in World War II combined, that one thing, even if it remained the size of a building, let's just pretend that they never miniaturized it, which they did. The reality is crazier than this thought hypothesis. But let's just say it remained a building. It remained something that you had to like put on a barge and like escort it. It would still be wild if you managed to somehow fit it into like a warehouse. Call it, say it's 200 feet wide and 3 stories tall. I know it's 3 stories. Nah, I'm gonna be probably wrong on that, but even that, like that's crazy. That building is that building would contain more explosive power than all of the explosives used in World War II combined. Now imagine if that was never tested and it was just theorized. It was just an I heard. It was just a rumor or a conspiracy. Like, you wouldn't really believe it. You'd be like, no, that's not true. You wouldn't doubt that they had something. Like, I bet they have. They dropped it on Hiroshima. Like, yeah, I bet they scaled that thing up. I bet those guys in the Pentagon did that. I don't think it's 1,000 times stronger. That's goofy. But they did just 7 years later. And then they made it crazier to where it wasn't a building on an island. It was a bomb that you could put on a plane. Like that. So, what would it be then if there was something with that much of a paradigm shifting leap but it wasn't on something that was a second rising sun to where it was kind of hard to hide. It was, we have this thing, we're going to test it. Its level of success will be inversely proportional to its classification. The more successful it is, the harder it is to hide, and vice versa. But what happens? It's like if you ever seen one of those videos where I think is it a methane fire or like an like a hydrogen fire? I think it's methane, but it's an invisible fire, and it's not. It's just not in the visible spectrum. It's not in a electromagnetic wavelength that human eyes pick up, but it's fire, and you can find video, and they're terrifying. But it's like NASCAR crashes where there are invisible fires, and people are like running around, like stop, dropping, and roll. Like that's terrifying. But even that is a corollary or parallel to something that we know: fire. We know what it is. Like, what if no one had ever seen fire before, and you just were pitching that this thing existed? Oh, by the way, it's invisible. You'd be like, "Well, you fuck off. Will you shut up?" No, it's scary, and it's like water, but not. It's like the opposite of water. You'd be like, "Will you shut up?" But that exists. You know, even if a hydrogen bomb was invisible, if there was no thermal pulse, no, I guess that wouldn't be invisibility. If there was no visible light, you know, just shining like a star, even if it was just the shock wave, that'd still be near impossible to hide. Yeah, I don't think you could hide it, but it would be a little creepier if it was invisible. But it's still not as pronounced as if you didn't have to test it at all. What if they didn't have to test hydrogen bombs? Like what? You wouldn't know until it was too late, and then by then the classification wouldn't matter because it'd be the end. But it would be such a jump up. It and you couldn't say anything about it. And if you did, if you broke your clearance and said it to, they wouldn't believe you. Oh, and how convenient! They don't test it. All right, yeah, that's very convenient. Yeah, no, I've got the coolest thing in the world, but I'm not allowed to show. Yeah, okay. Sounds like a form of psychological warfare deterrence. But what would an invisible hydrogen bomb like a methane fire? If they developed a chip that was stronger than all the computational power on Earth combined, that's a hydrogen bomb. But they don't have to test it. Or excuse me, they can test it, but it's not but for all intents and purposes, for you and I, it's not tested. Even if you were to test like, you know, the idea of the Aurora back in the 80s, it was successor to the SR-71 Blackbird, and it was like a mock. It's any aviation head knows about it. It's like the unicorn. You'd still be, and people postulate that it is because at the same time, like every week near Nevada, they would detect these series of low level earthquakes at like 6 a.m. on the third Thursday of the month every month. And they call them skyquakes, and it's because it was going so fast that the sonic boom actually registers. Like there would be tiny little proxies to where you'd be able to. The reason I do think we went to the moon is because I think the Soviets If they could have proven that we didn't, I think they would have. I think China would have. Like, what detectable way? Now, I'm sure that there would be ways to detect it. Let's assume no one speaks. Let's assume that it's nobody breaking their clearance. Let's assume that it's zipped up. Better than the Manhattan Project because Klaus Fuchs and the Rosenberg spoke. There would probably be ways to detect it. I think the first would be not detecting it at all, but it would be hypothesizing that it's possible, like the Manhattan Project. Like the Nazis didn't learn about it from us. It's we would both know it's possible, and we'd both assume the other was working on it. So that would be like the first level of detection. Would be a computer scientist or a materials scientist, metamaterials, or just somebody, I don't know, using a graph like Ray Kurzweil. You would just track it and you'd say, like, yeah, by now it seems like that's possible. But the burden of proof would be on you. And you'd say, well, it's classified. And again, very convenient. You have a wild hypothesis that can't be proven, and if it was, it's classified. It's yeah, very convenient. My invisible friend only shows up when you guys aren't. Okay, yeah. I imagine it would be detectable next by probably nation states. I would imagine that there would be unique cyber attacks or probes or more successful ones or more adaptable ones. It's a game of cat and mouse. I think that's something you'd see. It's like probes on military labs. I don't think you would use something like a quantum computer. I don't think you would use that to hack a fighter jet. I feel like that's lower level stuff. It's probably still very advanced and classified and would be impressive to you and I using conventional computers. Stuff that, doesn't need to be profitable. And it would be just some giant farm of, I don't know, GPUs or something. Well, the only way that's possible is it. It's like what the Soviets said about the space shuttle, which is actually kind of smart. They said it is in no way profitable, which means it has a military function, which I think is just it's so great, especially coming from the Soviets, like the entire uh, you know opposition to the capitalist pigs. The fact that they were like, there is not a good yield for stockholders, therefore it's military. We know we're the kings at forced labor. It is kind of funny, but they were right. I mean, we now know that there was tons of NRO and NGA, National Geospatial Agency projects, and you could almost argue that that's entirely the point. I mean, the reason why the space shuttle had that giant bay, the reason why it was so goofy, is because the Air Force had tons of requirements. I would imagine a lot of Air Force funding went to that. And it is pretty smart to say it's NASA and call it civilian owned. But again, the Soviets are like, yeah, we're the kings of this dog shit. We know dog shit when we see it. Um, that is hilarious though. So there would be, yeah, I would imagine more unique. I think the first level would be you'd have People theorizing it's possible. I think my bathroom fan went off. My dryer's in there, and I turned the fan on because it sucks out the hot air. 1 second. Heaven's Harvest Prepper Food. 72 servings per pail, 25 years shelf life. I've had the owner Clayton on the show before. He's a God-fearing, America-loving patriot. Get one of these, get a couple of them, throw them in your basement. It's good to have it, not need it, than to need it and not have it. If you don't want to do that, you can get their seeds. You can plant your own garden, so you don't even have to keep buying them. You can just get the goods and start your own, or you can even get freeze-dried fruits and vegetables like bananas, apples, strawberries, and raspberries. They support the show. It's an honest product. It's a good safety measure to have, and they keep my show free for you. So I'd implore you guys to please go to heavensharvest.com, use the link in the description, promo code TPC. Axios Fitness Coaching is a premium resource for holistic strength and conditioning services. Axios is best known for the Training Club, capital T, capital C, an exclusive community that prioritizes accountability, technique, diet, and nutrition. Everything you need to do to take action against the decay of the modern world. Whether you're looking to improve your physique, build strength, or just take care of your health and fitness, Axios will provide you with a solution that is effective and simple to execute. All you need to do is complete the intake survey, and you can see if you're a good candidate for the training club or any other of the services. And it's going to sponsor the show. So, one company falls off, another one arises. So, if you guys like the show, you want to work out, throw the show a couple shekels, go take the survey. Thank you so much, guys.
Higher ultraviolet exposure is associated with lower mortality. The United Kingdom is a high latitude and low sunlight country. Researchers there collected data on over 360,000 participants in a study of UV exposure via solarium use. When compared with non-users, solarium users had 15% risk lowered of all-cause mortality, 23% lower risk of cardiovascular mortality, 14% lower risk of cancer mortality, and a 12% lower risk of non-cardiovascular, non-cancer mortality. In other words, all other causes. Quoting the researchers, our study adds to the growing evidence that the benefits of UV exposure outweigh the risks in low sunlight environments. A link to the original publication is available in the box below the video. Get some UV light this winter. Immerse yourself in the tranquility of the blue. Visit a Blue Room soon. www.blueroom.com.
But I suppose, just devil's advocate, I would suppose a lot of things are possible that we don't necessarily pursue. I bet if we wanted to, we could build like a segmented mile-long cruise ship. I know there's the idea for the Freedom Ship. Like, yeah, okay, but the difference is that this has a military application. Okay, all right, fair enough. It would be that. The next would be, I think, yeah, like unique cyber attacks. You wouldn't want to show your hand. But I don't know, maybe you do little probes with it just to kind of put the fear of God in them. Maybe you wouldn't even want to disclose that you have it, but just to put the fear of God in them. What do they have? I know one thing we did in some Cold War dictatorship in South America. They saw whenever the scheduled state speech was, where it was required that you show up and cheer. We scheduled it so sometime during like the hour speech, they had two SR-71s go over at whatever altitude and have sonic booms just rock the whole thing, and it was to say like we're there with impunity, like off. Some people are like, that's American hegemony, and I'm like, you goddamn right it is. I can't grow a beard, and if I don't shave for dare to get stubble. And because I always shave, I never have stubble, so it's very unique. It's very novel to me, which is why I'm doing this. Um, Yeah, you'd probably have unique cyber attacks on really high level stuff. You wouldn't waste it on, you wouldn't waste it on an office building. And you probably attack stuff, military labs or bunkers that your foe, China, Russia, whatever, wouldn't even want to admit. Yeah, there it's beeping. They wouldn't even want to admit that it had been probed, because that would probably be acknowledging it exists. I mean, it might even be, yeah, they don't even want to acknowledge that thing exists. But let's say it's public knowledge that it exists. You also don't want to acknowledge that it's been probed, because that shows impotence. I think the third would be, actually, maybe there'd be a 2B, bullet point B under 2, would be enhanced super security, again, only around crown jewels of your own military research facilities. Again, not lower tier stuff, but around DARPA, or I don't know, that dryer is beeping. This is the second series of beeps, so there's going to be one more series and it's over. Yeah, so it'd be unique attacks on facilities. Maybe it's not 2B. Maybe it's just, you can see my OCD coming. They used to drive me crazy making study guides in college. And sometimes I wouldn't know how to organize things, and I would freeze up like a computer. Like yeah, but it'd be a form of defense. I think the third level, and I don't know how accurate this is, but I feel like it's financial. You do something with finance. The first would be theorizing it's possible. The second, what would you immediately do? Use it for military gain. And then what's the next thing you do? You use it to make a couple bucks. Like, it's not we're not hard to predict in terms of like a species. Species. Is it she or species? Species. Speciation or yeah, maybe the foggy clouds is an allegory for. I'm not entirely on up to snuff today. My stomach hurts. Legitimately hurts. But yeah, it'd be, I don't know. I would imagine you might have somebody reel it in. Some cooler head. Be like, you can't use this to do high yield. There's the third set of beeps. You can't use this to do high frequency trading on the bond market. Like, you can't. You can't do it. You can't take the supercomputer to stalk your ex girlfriend. You can't do it. I would hope that there was cooler heads. I don't entirely know. One would be theorizing it's possible through either just a graph of computational power and or metamaterials. The second would be military probes and or defense. I do think the third would be something financial. I just don't see it not. Probing of military facilities, less, it would be much hard. So another thing that would be probing communications, but that would be something, I imagine. I know nothing about ELINT or SIGINT. That would be something where you wouldn't want to show your hand that you'd done it, because then they know to change their procedures. But it might also be that, electronic communication and cryptology is so advanced that it's maybe you can't hack it without them seeing your fingerprint. Like I know the whole Enigma thing. It's we hacked it or the British hacked it, and but you still let Allied ships get sunk because if you started acting in a way where all of their super secret plans were being thwarted, they would know that their super secret way of relaying messages was bunk, and thus they wouldn't use it anymore, or they'd switch it up. And the bigger picture would be we want to win the war, so you'd still, yeah, I mean, so I don't know. That's definitely something you do, communications, but I don't know. I know nothing about that, so I know nothing about any of this. But I feel like that's something where it's not quite the same as like listening in. There's probably I would imagine it's so advanced and shielding, be it literal or metaphorical or cryptological, you can probably tell if someone's listening. There's some digital or electronic fingerprint. You know, the equivalent of you're in the bathroom and the door's locked and somebody opens it and you're like, you should have knocked, but I know you're trying to come in here. Something like that. And then the last way, well, not the last way, there'd be a zillion ways, but predicting that's feasible, followed by probing in military facilities or defensive military facilities. And or communications. The third would be financial. You someone somewhere would try to make a buck or whatever. The last way would be probably the hardest to detect. And even if you did detect it, it would be the most impossible one to prove. But it would be the actions of what you would use that computational power for. Like if you gave it control of the DoD or, whatever, even just an agency or yeah, even if you just gave it a test run, you're like, we're going to give it command of the Coast Guard. Would like interdiction of drugs go up 90%? Well, no, because it's because we're the ones shipping it. Hey, you don't need a quantum computer. You just have the CIA be like, will you stand down? But that's what I think you test it out on something smaller first, but then inevitably you'd give it control, you'd give it the reins. And again, why wouldn't you? Because at a certain point, and I know nothing about chess, but like our dominance of the board isn't necessarily because we're better at chess. It's because we can like make more chess pieces. Where our military force is just so huge that it's not that we're necessarily better tacticians. You could say it is, or that our individual pieces are better, but for the sake of this, let's just say it's total number of pieces. Or it's not that we're a better football coach, it's that we're allowed to have 50 players on the field. Allowed? Well, who's going to tell us not to? You'd have to have a military to tell us not to, and that's our military. I don't doubt that we're extremely skilled at it, and we might even be better tacticians. And if it was a fair game, 10 on 10, we might still win. And then, yeah, but it's 50 on 10. I don't know. But at a certain point, you would have to imagine something like China would be like, we can't catch up. We can get close. America does 50 on 10 to the rest of the world. Maybe you're trying to get it to where it's 50 on 25. But at a certain point, you'd want to nullify that lead by having a better coach. Like, I know nothing about football. I love how everything I'm talking about today is something I know nothing about. I know nothing about football. If you gave me 100 players and Bill Belichick had to have 10, whatever the number is, 13, I might be able to win. I might actually be able to win. So, yeah, I don't need to understand what routes they're running. Just put 10 receivers on them, or 10 defensive whatever. I don't care what your O line is doing. I'm just gonna swamp it with literally 100 people. All out blitz, suicide blitz, every play. But eventually, you got to go toe to toe when it comes to tactician. So in the same sense that China knows that, man, it is so foggy outside. At some point, I mean, we understand the logic of unrestricted warfare, right? That they can't fight us tank for tank, so they do other things: financial, fentanyl, cyber hacking, devaluing their own currency, blah blah blah, stealing IP. Those are all because they understand that they can't go toe to toe with us in a traditional sense. So, following that logic, a non traditional sense would be to have a better tactician. Now, I get that some things wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter if you created some super admiral AI. If it's 13 aircraft carriers on one, it kind of doesn't matter. If I have 100 football players on the field and you put some super Bill Belichick AI on the other side, there is a point where it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how intricate your offensive plans are, or 1,000 on 10. At a certain point, it doesn't matter, right? Quantity's a quality all on its own. So I get it's not necessarily gonna like work on that level. Like, what is your aircraft carrier gonna outmaneuver? Like, I get it's not like some Allen Iverson doing some sick crossover. I mean, and what would the AI's brilliant plan even be? We'll just use nukes, but yeah, we that we've that dawned on us 80 years ago. What it would be is in the sense of unrestricted warfare. You dial it up even more. Like, not just financial, but, you know, and not just, hey, let's do cyber where, we randomly attack power plants. You would maybe be able to find a way to attack power plants in a pattern that instead of just randomly attacking 10 power plants throughout, I don't know, the southeast, you hit one in Atlanta, Miami, Birmingham, whatever. It might be able to say, with those same 10 power plants that you were going to hit anyway, and this would be like efficacy, for whatever reason, if you did them all on this day at this time, in my simple mind, I'm like, do it over a holiday. Oh, yeah, sure, Thanksgiving, that shit up. But you can, I don't know, maybe it'd be even something more. Like, we know that this merger is happening between these corporations and that this office is here and that that's there and that the backup for this, whatever server center is here. And you're not going to be able to stop it outright, but you'd be able to really make it a headache. Like, feel like if Hurricane Katrina happened again, like that would, and this isn't my idea, I heard from the comedian Ray Kump, but he made a great point, was he's like, it might not be that climate change is, like the movies where it's like, oh, it's, 800 degrees below zero. It might just be you have Hurricane Katrina, but if you just had that every 2 months, in and of itself, it's not like a new thing. It doesn't require new relief and emergency powers, but just again and again and again. Like I lived in Atlanta. I was a freshman in high school when Katrina hit, and we had a ton of students that were transplanted to Atlanta, and then a lot of them just never left. Their families just never left. They just ended up staying there. But like, what if Atlanta was also hit? Like, and on, to where it's like it's a simple thing, but it's just all adding up. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. The AI might be something where it's not even some thing where it's like we're gonna scale it up, and instead of with the street lights in Charlotte, North Carolina, we found a way that if you did them on this day, whatever, when the financial quarters change or something, that might not seem like much. It might be 30% more disruptive than normal. But what if you then just did that to all forms of unconventional warfare, not just flood fentanyl, or they're like focus it on like one state, like put all 100,000 fentanyl deaths in like one city, and then maybe that has an effect of where other cities have to go and aid. That itself is ends up being synergistic to where it almost has the same financial, social, whatever impact of a million deaths. So you would conclude that they would do that because it's the right move. Being in the DoD or the Pentagon, you would hypothesize this and go, they're gonna. And it comes back down to the hydrogen bomb thing. It's one, it would be the limit of can you make it, but then it would be like, do you have the balls to use it, or are you crazy enough to give it more power over your systems? It's a very unique idea because at that level of power, the whole thing is power for power's sake, and your power comes from the perception of your power and holding on to that power. It's like the idea that like the reason why we don't disclose UFOs is because we want that weapons technology for ourselves and that energy. More importantly than anything else is the energy and the physics that it implies. Let's say we never got one of those UFOs and it really was a UFO and we didn't know what the it was. The last thing you're going to do in the seat of power is say our airspace is being invaded by a force we don't understand, because that's impotence. At that highest level, that's impotence. And if you're showing impotence and you're showing weakness, well, now people below you are starting to look at you like you're an aging lion. Maybe it's my turn on the throne. So it's an interesting thing of you want the power, but you don't want to cede the power to something else. It's for very human reasons. The only reason you would let go of more power, so like you build the quantum chip and we go, but we've only given it control of 5% of the Pentagon, or we gave you control of the Coast Guard or the Arkansas Highway Patrol. The only reason you would give away more power to something like that would be if you felt that another nation was. And China would be a little more inclined to be like, they'd be a little more inclined to gamble because they're not in first place. If you're in first place, it's like, why bet vital money to get luxury money? But if you're in second place, you're a little more inclined to cheat or try steroids. Yeah, okay, I get booted, whatever. I didn't want second place. It's first place or bust. You're a little more inclined to do that. In the same way that the scientists told Truman, like, yeah, the Soviets could probably do it in like 5 years, the hydrogen bomb. And he was like, well, then now we have to do it. So it's less that it's possible and that we can do it, and should we do it. Some people incorrectly point to the Edward Teller backyard bomb that was going to be 10 gigatons, 10,000 megatons, and be like, well, we did hit a limit to where we said it was too crazy, and not really. We realized that it was there's actually like an article from the 50s about like why we don't need 100 megaton bomb, and it shows the cubed law versus area of like it's actually more effective to do 10 megaton bombs than 100 megaton. It's just like it's hilarious public discourse. I mean, I wish we had that back. I wish we had it back to where the government felt the need to come out and answer to the citizens on why we were being pussies and not putting out a 100 megaton bomb. Like, no, 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 no. It's not because we're scared of it. We've actually found that it's far more lethal to have smaller ones, but have a lot of them. We're like, all right. I was meant to be alive then. But you would feel the need to do it if you thought China was doing it or whoever. So then you would start giving more power to yours. Maybe our quantum computer is twice as strong as China's. Yeah, but we've only given ours 5% autonomy. China's is only half as strong, but they gave theirs 50% autonomy. So in theory, theirs is stronger than ours. So then it would be a race to the bottom of that, which would very quickly hit zero. That would just go that would just go back and forth until you just turn the dial all the way. But then, and this is again where the burden of proof lies on, in this instance, me, and I don't have the burden of proof. But it's like the quote, one step ahead you look genius, two steps ahead you look crazy. I've been thinking more and more like, well, then what would three steps ahead look like? And the best I can conclude is that it would look unrelated. I was thinking about that a lot the other night. One step ahead would look like genius. Two steps ahead would look crazy. Three steps ahead would look unrelated. Not crazy or genius, or it would just look unrelated. Like one step ahead. That's like Elon Musk getting into rockets in the early 2000s and saying, by NASA's announced that by whatever, 2010, 2012, they're retiring the shuttle. He's looking 10 years ahead and go, well, I'm going to plan to be able to do what we will be using the Soyuz for, which is hitching a ride. One step, man, that looks very smart, man. Yeah, you looked ahead 10 years and you're like, yeah, I'm going to make that thing happen. It was a gamble, you did it. Two steps ahead is saying I'm going to make them land themselves to reduce the cost of kilos to orbit or dollar per kilo to orbit. To the point where not just the average person was saying you look crazy, his NASA heroes were saying you look like a idiot. And he did it. So now it looks like genius, right? It looks crazy, and then you go, whoa, wow, that was genius. Look, what would three steps ahead look like? And the best I can conclude is three steps ahead would look unrelated. It's the best I've been able to whittle it down to. It would be like it would be unrelated. It would be let's say in relation to SpaceX. Nothing else he's doing. Let's just say in relation to SpaceX. It would be the Cybertruck. Non-relational like net worth, because that makes sense. It's another business. If that was somehow linked to SpaceX, that's not even a really good example because it's the idea that that could be pressurized and used on Mars. Okay, whatever. Well, to him, I don't know, getting multiple women pregnant. Like, let's say it's that is somehow related. That's also not a good one because maybe build a huge gene line and send them into the star. I don't know. Maybe it'd be so unrelated it wouldn't even be Elon. It'd be me starting this podcast. That's what we'll call it. One step ahead is saying that in 10 years the space shuttle will be retired and we gotta whatever. Two steps ahead would be we're gonna reduce cost to orbit, self landing. Three steps ahead would be I start a podcast. Who? It would be unrelated. Which is very convenient that I'm making an argument that the existence of something is predicated upon unrelated activities. So the fact that Apple's cost X dollars is related to the next level of SpaceX. Well, yeah, that's how convenient. My point can't be like disproven. But outside the other ones, possibility, military probing and defense, and or finance, it would be unrelated. And there's kind of nowhere to go from that in terms of like me talking right now. Like, what do you? And what would it look like if it didn't exist? It would look like the same as if it did exist. The price of apples are going up. Like I don't. But I also think that so you could walk it out to its extreme and go, well, then what would a quantum computer be used for? Like, what would you use it for? You'd use it to solidify your power. It's the fact that there's seemingly been successful opposite. I always used to say that that Trump had allies in the military industrial or military intelligence community, not in a QAnon sense, but I can't even see the cop cars. It's so foggy. I always used to say he has some allies because the fact that he won in 2016 at all, and the fact that after 2020 he wasn't killed. They drag his name through mud. They're doing all the lawfare, but they didn't kill him. I'm like that. To me, my logic was always that's how I know he has allies in very high places, is because at the very least they have. And then that went out the window when they almost did. So, but he got back in, and he's successfully just kind of going wild. To me, that implies. So if Microsoft's talking openly with YouTubers about Majorana 1, that implies that they have like Majorana 5 somewhere, and even if that is a private company, that implies that the NSA has something farther ahead than that, which means the opposition to Trump or Elon or whatever you want to call it, the not globalism. Let's try to remove the name of Trump because it's so incendiary. The opposition to globalism, transnational power structure raping the planet. That means that that was accessible as a tool at your own disposal to whoever's at the hands of the whoever's running the show in the U.S. government, more specifically the military intelligence community. And if they're, I don't think they wanted to shoot him. That's way too messy, literally and figuratively. But it's something that they did leave on the table. Like, we will do it if all else fails. We will do it. But if you're willing to do that, that means you're willing to do everything, quote unquote, beneath that. If you're willing to drop a nuke on Hiroshima, you're willing to throw a grenade at Hiroshima, is my point. Willing to do a blatantly stolen 2020 election, okay. Did they release COVID? Okay, you're willing to do that. Are you willing and able to enact censorship laws through Facebook and Twitter, knowing full well it would come to light one day? Yeah, you'd be willing to do that. You'd be willing to throw Trump in Fulton County Jail and give him a mugshot and whatever, 34 trillion felony counts for breathing or whatever. Yeah, you'd be willing to do all that. Try to keep him off the ballot. Keep Bobby Kennedy on the ballot. You'd be willing to do all that. Shoot him. Yeah, you'd be willing to do that. And once you showed you're willing to do that, you're willing to try it again and again. But if you're willing to do all those, you'd also be willing to use an advanced military weapon, tool. And again, it's not something you'd use all the time because you don't want to blow its secrecy on something stupid like hacking a ATM. You want to save it for, I don't know, Chinese fusion research facilities or nanotech labs. Would you not use it to oppose Trump? I mean, you could say, well, how would you know that they didn't try? Because I'm hypothesizing that one step ahead looks genius, two steps ahead looks like you're crazy, three steps ahead would be unrelated. But what you could imply from the unrelated would be, well, what was the end goal? What was the end point of the unrelated? The unrelated would be stopping Trump from getting in power. Or once he got in power, stop him from being able to do what he wants to do. So you don't even necessarily need to know what the quantum computer would be used for. By its definition, you would say, well, it's doing something that you can't comprehend. Otherwise, we'd have humans doing it. But what you could detect is the end goal. And it doesn't seem to be that their end goal worked. Now maybe it's all bullshit, and Trump and Elon are part of the Illuminati, and this is all possibly. It's also kind of like a moot point. Like, yeah, so it's all. There's really kind of nowhere to go. Spoiler alert: find God. But the implication would be that through some way or another, he wouldn't end up in office. Like, let's say he didn't run again in 2024. And we're having this discussion right now. You'd say, yeah, they whipped that out in 2020. And it was so good at being a denied operation, a plausibly denied operation, that to you, it looked like not just the whole ballots going, but it looked like a respiratory virus from a wet market in China and a bunch of riots because of the killing of George Floyd. You'd be like, in hindsight, we can see the end point, the end result was that he didn't get back in office and doing what he wanted to do, which was restructuring the existing world order. But it wouldn't have been as obvious as Kennedy, where they just blew his head off. You'd say it sure looks like the end result was preventing him from going back in office, but it's just nimble enough that the perpetrators could argue reasonably that it really was a virus from a wet market, that it really was riots over a killing. And that argument would stand, except for the fact that he got back in office. And a counterpoint would be, well, then your whole point's none of this stuff, the quantum computer doesn't exist. Okay, but I'm going on the whole, it does. From, okay, well, the Majorana thing's fake. Okay, well, then if that's fake, then Mark Zuckerberg's a robot. He's not actually there. So you can go down that chain of logic or lack thereof, and it nullifies everything. Solipsism, you're the only self-awareness. None of this actually matters. Okay. But if we're saying that it does exist, and if Microsoft's showing you this, then they have something stronger, and then stronger than that would be whatever the military has. So then the best I could conclude would be that given all those variables, which it could all be horseshit. I mean, what do I know? Given all those variables and given the endpoint we're seeing now, it would be that it does exist, and thus a military version exists, and that it's not impotent to stop Trump and Elon at all, but that it's helping them. Now, it's a lot of floating points with uncertain foundations. I get the scaffolding is putting together an image that is wobbly at best. But for the sake of this hypothesis, it's that it does exist. And that it was not impotent to stop them, but rather sided with them or was wielded by them. And if that's the case, then they would currently be unstoppable. Because the first two things you would do with a quantum computer would use the quantum computer to build a second generation faster and more capable than anything humans could. And at the same time, you would also use it to sabotage and smother in the cradle other quantum computers. So I guess if you like Trump and Elon, this would be good news. And if you didn't, this would be a nightmare. But that's the best I can conclude. It's just kind of been on my mind lately. And so the closing line of the paper would be that it does exist and it didn't fail. It's doing exactly what it was told to do or what it wants to do. I don't I feel like that has to be it. They're using it and that resistance is futile. I don't Now I happen to like Trump and Elon, so to me I go, "Oh, we won." Yeah. I don't know. I don't really when I was thinking about doing this episode, I was like, it's not going to be a popular one.